Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we will be going over two topics, data types and functions. As both these topics are extremely important and very in-depth, we will do more high-level overview of both and go into more detail later on. Now let's begin. In JavaScript, there are 8 data types: string, number, big int, boolean, undefined, null, symbol, and object. Let's see some examples. First, strings. Strings can be defined by either single quotes, double quotes, or even backticks. Backticks have a special ability that single and double quotes don't. However, we're gonna keep that a secret until much later. Just an aside, you can use any set of quotes inside another set as long as you don't use the outer quote type anywhere in the string. Next we have number. Most programming languages will have many different types of numbers, such as byte, which is 8 bits, short, which is 16, int, which is 32, or long, which is 64. Those are just the whole numbers. For the real numbers, or floating point numbers as they are alternatively known, you will generally have a float, which is 32-bit number, and double, which is a 64-bit number. All JavaScript numbers are stored as one type, and that is a 64-bit float. This means numbers can be written with or without decimal numbers, and all numbers are stored the same. JavaScript has some neat tricks with numbers, such as numbers that are extremely large or extremely small can be written with exponential notation. A recent addition to JavaScript is the big int. This can store a number that is larger than a 64-bit number. Just for some context here, a 64-bit number is 18 quintillion 446 quadrillion 744 trillion 73 billion 709 million 551,615. That is the largest number that you can store in a 64-bit number, which is a massive amount but not massive enough. So now we have big int. Next we have boolean. This is pretty straightforward. It is either true or false. Those are your only two options. These are generally used inside of comparisons. Next, we have undefined. Undefined is a bit special. Undefined is not equal to null. Undefined is very specifically the absence of any value, meaning no value has been assigned at all. Next, we have null. This is assigned to show no information is present, however, it is still considered a value. And this is the major difference between undefined and null. Whereas undefined is an absence of value, null is used to say that there is just no value currently. Next we have symbol. Symbol is a bit of an advanced topic onto its own. However, in the shortest of terms, it's a way to create a unique identifier for key value pairs. Well, most commonly anyway. Next is the thing that JavaScript is most known for, the object. An object can be many things. It can be a person's details in one record, it can be a set of functions, it can be a set of other objects, or even just a date. The JS object is the single most amazing and wild thing ever. You will be getting into objects in depth later on. In programming, data types are very important to understand. When working with variables, it is important to know something about the type. Without knowing anything about a variable, you can end up trying to add strings to numbers, and this will have some wild outcomes if you are not very careful. Below we have two different examples. In the first, we are saying 15 plus 5 plus the string bike, which gives us an output of 20 bike. The second, we have the string bike plus 15 plus 5, which will give an output of bike 155. Now the reason for the weird behavior is as follows. In the first example, JavaScript evaluates everything from left to right. So first we have 15 plus 5, it then adds those up and returns 20. Next it will take that 20 and try and add it to the string bike. However, rather than throwing an exception, JavaScript tried to be more user-friendly, so it will automatically convert 20 to a string so that the function makes sense. In the second example, as we are starting with a string of bike, it will automatically assume that everything needs to be concatenated. Thus, it converts both 15 and 5 into strings first, and then concatenates the whole thing. Another example, this applies to variables in the same way. Here's the string BOGO plus 18888. This equals BOGO 1888. This can cause some headaches, so this is why I prefer to use the Hungarian naming convention to make the errors less likely to occur. Now, how does one figure out what type of variable actually is? Well, JavaScript has a built-in function called typeOf. This will return the type of the value that is provided. So if you provide it with a 0, it will return number. Next, if we say 123.4, it will also return number. Now notice how in the first example we did not use any parentheses, and in the second we did. It is not required that you use parentheses, however I would suggest that you always use them. If we pass in the string hello, it will return type of string. Now what if we declare a variable and don't provide a value? Well, then you get undefined, the lack of any value. So if we declare a variable with an empty string, we should get undefined? No, this is still a string. Even if the string is of 0 characters, it's still considered a string. Well, that was interesting. Now let's get into functions. This is where we will be able to start writing our first application. Exciting! First up, what is a function? A function is essentially a block of code that will be run when it is invoked or called. So to put this more simply, a function is a set of instructions that are replayed every time it is called. As an example, if you click play on a YouTube video, it starts playing. Now reload the page and press play again. What happens? It plays the exact same video in exactly the same way. That's what functions do. It creates smaller blocks of code that you can call whenever you have to do the same thing repeatedly. Now let's see a function in action. Here we have a function called myFirstFunction, and it will just print hello world to the console. Now let's break it down. Components to a function. First is the function keyword, followed by the name, then parentheses. Next is the curly braces. Anything inside these curly braces will be what is executed. Now we have the next level. What is that, you may ask? Arguments. You can pass arguments into functions and do things to them inside that function. So in this example, we have a function called myMathFunction. It takes in 2 arguments, int1 and int2, then adds those together and prints it to the console. Perfect. Now let's test this out. We can do this by opening a browser, right-clicking and choosing Inspect. Click on Console and type the following into the console. Function, myMathFunction, open parentheses, int1, comma, int2, comma, opening curly brace, console.log, opening parentheses, int1 plus int2, closing parentheses, closing curly brace, and press enter. And what do you get? Undefined. Well, that doesn't seem right. That's where the second part of functions come into play, calling the function. Now let's type myMathFunction, opening parentheses, pass in any 2 arguments. I will put in 5 and 10 and hit enter. Pow! 15. You have just created the most limited calculator that you probably will ever use. Now we're cooking. Let's take it to level 3. Return. What is return? Well, it's a real cool that we can write values to the console, but sometimes we want to input a variable, do something with that variable and not print it. So that's where return comes in handy. You can create a function, and when you call the function, rather than printing it to the console, it will just provide a value. Now, if you try this, you will notice when you call the function, nothing happens, and that's the point. We can now assign this function return value to a variable to be used somewhere else. So now let's create a variable, welcome, and let's assign it the function we just made. And huzzah, it prints out the message. Now this is a lot of steps just to print to the console. How we did it first was way easier. However, this was to show the use of functions. They are incredibly useful and very important. And that is it for today. Now in the next video, we will be moving away from the slide format and moving into writing in our code editor of choice. We will be covering objects in more detail and discussing events. This is where we start putting all the pieces together to start making things. Now, as always, you have leveled up in programming. Thank you so much for all the support and the suggestions you guys have made thus far. I appreciate it immensely. I shall see you in the next video.